Welcome to Synchronize Swatches. For this bonus episode, we've got a special treat. We were fortunate enough to sit down and have a chat with Parker Lewis himself, Mr. Corin Nemec. We talked about a ton of stuff, so much in fact that we're breaking this into a two-parter. So without further ado, here is part one of our interview with Corin Nemec.
Gentlemen, Synchronize Swatches. Not a problem.
I mean, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think back to this show?
Honestly, it's the good time that I had working with the cast. Everybody on the cast was just wonderful. We all got along really, really well. We had such a good time on set working together. The directors were great. All the writer producers were great. The entire team was just a blast. I got to become pretty good friends with the cast as well, off camera and over the years. I still stay in pretty close touch with Abraham Ben-Ruby, who played Kubiak, and Troy Slayton, who played Jerry, and Maya Bruton, who played Shelley, and as well as Tim Stack, who played my father. We catch up on occasion. I hope you guys got the email I sent with their contact info in case you want to follow up with them. They're all just wonderful people, and they would love to be a part of this incredible podcast you guys are doing.
Thanks, man. No, we appreciate you sending that, and we're definitely going to reach out to them. Yeah. We figured once we get you on, we'll have a little more, we'll feel a little more legitimate. And then once we have your interview,
just instead of being a couple of, just a couple of randos, just like, hey, we remember this show you were on. Want to talk to us? So if we can put your face out there,
gives us a little more legitimacy.
I love it. Whatever I can do to help.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Yeah, I feel like what you were talking about with everybody getting along, that really comes through on the show. I think one of the things that we noticed, I think, very quickly, is how quickly the characters come into full form. Like it might be like episode 2 or 3 when they've completely shed that whole like pilot awkwardness that shows have a lot of times. Yeah. I think that really kind of shows through. It's evident on screen that you guys get along and work well together, and it's a great ensemble cast for that reason.
Yeah, and also we got to, by the time we went into production on the full series after the pilot, we really got to figure out our characters. I got to weigh in quite a bit more on the look of the character. You obviously noticed that the first pilot episode, Parker Lewis was a little bit more hipsterish looking, and I really wanted to have that. Not that the show is has anything to do with hip hop or the rap scene at the time, but that was a big part of my life, and I wanted my character to kind of have that Gumby do, that was popular back then. It was sort of a white boy high top fade with the sharp, with the sharp part, and the wild patterned shirts, which was very popular in that subculture at the time, with the khaki pants and the high top sneakers. We were sponsored by Adidas for the show, which was great for me because I got all kinds of free Adidas gear that I wore off the show. But by the time we got into production on the first real episode after the pilot, I mean, we were all so excited. I'd say the hardest part about making it really was you had to be absolutely verbatim on the writing. There was no wiggle room for making the dialogue your own or for changing, anything from, that was scripted. It was like you say exactly what's on the page. It was like doing Shakespeare. I mean, obviously not doing Shakespeare, but, if you're doing a Shakespearean play, you don't change the dialogue. What I mean?
Right.
And it was they were very strict on that, and for good reason, too. The writers were fantastic. Clyde Phillips and Lon Diamond, the two creators of the show, and Robert Lloyd Lewis. There was a lot of the characters that kind of came out from them. In fact, like Clyde Phillips was the Parker Lewis character, and Lon Diamond was the Mikey character, and Robert Lloyd Lewis was the Jerry character. So there's in an essence, that there was a clear connotation to them in real life and to the characters on the show.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I was wondering about the ad libbing. I was like, I feel like it's the type of show you can't really ad lib much because it's so tightly engineered with all the visual gags and all the timing. I was like, it didn't seem like there was a lot of room for that kind of acting. I was wondering about that.
Yeah, there wasn't, and our work hours were insane. I mean, to pull off that show, we were doing a lot of cinematic work that just was way out of the norms for television. The cinematic approach to the TV show was really based off of the movie 3 O'Clock High with Casey Shamasco, where the camera itself was like a character in the show. And that's what they really wanted, and they achieved it, 100%.
Oh, yeah.
But the hours that we spent, I mean, some of those scenes were like a one shot. That's it. That's all you got was one take, to get it right. But we would do, to get that one take might have taken, 7, 8, sometimes 9 times because, if the focus went out at one point while we were doing something, or if we bumped a wall, or if a line was flubbed, or, I mean, any number of things could put us all the way back to the start. And we averaged 14 to 16 hours a day, kind of on average. And then when we got closer to Thursday and Friday, because it was a 5-day shoot for each episode, we would be up, anywhere from 16 to 18 hours a day. And on a couple of occasions went to 20, 22 hours, shooting time, which was exhausting.
Yeah.
But and was all consuming, of course. There was not much life outside of the show once we got into production on the seasons. And it's sort of, even though it helped us in a lot of ways because it set the tone and the style for at least the first 2 seasons, but part of why there was such a big change in third season was because of the budget on our show. Not quite as much as the ratings disparagement between shows like 90210, which was kind of what they were trying to compare us to, which was not a very fair comparison. But some of those shows, they were still using the Nielsen ratings back then. Yeah. And in the early 90s, most family households had 2 TVs at that point in time. And the Nielsen ratings were really antiquated by then as well. You're talking about a kind of a late 1960s approach to finding out how many people are watching your show, and they also, not one college student had a Nielsen box on their TV in their dorm room either, or in their shared apartment. And we had a massive college following. So, I don't think that their look at our ratings was as accurate as it could have been in modern times. Our rating was far higher than they really knew. Yeah. But because of that, all of that overtime we were doing, our show was running about as high and sometimes higher than 90210, which had like a bigger cast, and they were an hour drama, and and they were on, I think, about an 8-day schedule for their episodes. So that was alarming. And when Rupert Murdoch sold off Fox after our season 2, they pretty much fired all of the original executives that started Fox and all their lineups, and they put in all of their own executives, and they were just looking at these numbers and all this stuff, and they were like, well, we'd rather see Parker Lewis look, be a more of a comedic version of 90210 than what we were doing in the first 2 seasons. And they really forced our arm. There was no wiggle room whatsoever, and that's why there was such a dramatic change in the look of the character, the consistent girlfriend that came on, and the overall sort of watering down of the show in that 3rd season, which unfortunately was the nail in our coffin. If they had just left it alone and rode out the storm, I think we would have ended up with at least a 4th, maybe even a 5th season of the show.
Yeah, that was one of my questions, is because Chris and I, we barely remember season 3. We don't know if, because maybe it never went into syndication, or it also never had a DVD release in the States. So for some reason, it's just a foggy memory. Like we don't really remember it. But we do know from reading that like it was a complete tonal change, like, you know, really toning down all the stuff that make the show great. And I always wondered, I was like, why the hell did they do that? If it's not broke, you know, don't fix it. So that was one of my questions. I was like, was it a studio or network note? Because it felt like a network note. It doesn't feel like anybody creative involved in that show would make that decision.
Exactly. The writer producers fought so hard to keep the change from occurring, and it was tough on all of us because, you know, I think everybody in the entire cast, even though we did a long season, you know, I think we did 24 episodes the first season, around there, 22 to 24 episodes. And then second season, we did 26 episodes. And third season, we did 28 episodes. We ended up at about 78 episodes total, which 88 episodes is about the bare minimum that they want for syndication.
Right.
And I mean, it would have really been smart of the network to have at least picked up the final 10 and just said, okay, look, we're going to do 10 more of these shows, get us to 88. So syndication will be, you know, solid, because the network studio, everybody would have made more money, you know, in the long run if they had done that. And 10 more episodes wouldn't have killed them. Yeah. But but as far as syndication goes, USA Network did pick up all 3 seasons about roughly a year after the show went off the air, but they pretty much ran it back to back and ran all the episodes out and then never showed it again. So by around 1995 was about the last time the series ever showed in the USA, until they started running it on Crackle, however many few years back. And they ran it on Crackle for maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 years or something like that, you know, maybe a little longer. But and then unfortunately for all of us, internet streaming wasn't a part of residual income. So none of us saw any residuals for it streaming on Crackle. And Sony owns Crackle as well. And they were the studio that made that made the series. So that was kind of a drag too, you know, to see it running on Crackle all the time and not getting anything from it. You know, it's kind of scandalous if you ask me. But, you know, over in Europe, the show did far better than it did in the U.S. It ran in France, especially in France. They ran the show for 15 years practically. You know, it would go out of it would go off the air, and then maybe 2 years later it would come back on the air, and they'd run it again for another couple of years, and then so there's multiple generations over in France and Germany and some of the other European countries that really were big fans of Parker Lewis. So going over there, when I go over to do conventions and things like that, like they did a big Parker Lewis reunion convention in France about 4 years ago or so, and brought a good portion of the primary cast out there for it in Paris, and it was a great time. You know, people really love it, and you know, I found that the people seem to love Kubiak the best. That bastard!
Who doesn't love Kub?
Everybody loves Kubiak. They love the Kub.
Oh, that makes sense. I mean, the copy that we're watching is the German version. Like that's what we had to buy to get season 3, because we can't find season 3 anywhere. Except, I mean, there are, you know, curated lists on YouTube, you know, and that's when we mention this to people, it's like, you can follow us along there, because that was one of those things we didn't really think about. I think when we started was like, all right, let's do a recap podcast. Ah, crap, nobody can watch this, you know. So we got very lucky to find those playlists on there. But yeah, the version we're watching is German, and it's fun because we get to see the German title card, and it's not always, you know, it doesn't always translate. So we got all these interesting variations on, you know, because I don't remember what Close But No Guitar was, but it wasn't Close But No Guitar. It was something. Well, do you remember that one, Chip? Do you remember what
that one was? Actually, that one was like Mikey Randall's Superstar, I think. So that one
right.
actually wasn't like a German translation.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's like the German translations aren't always the same as the actual name of the episode. It's just interesting, so we have fun with that. But yeah, it's a Blu-ray that I bought from Germany, but it's just SD. It's not HD or anything like that. It's just they just pretty much ripped the DVDs onto a Blu-ray. But it was the only way I could find all 3 seasons, because you can get season 1, season 2 on a US DVD, but I guess they never released 3.
Yeah, that was. I thought that was kind of strange as well. That we had done. I forget the company that did the release on the DVD set here in the U.S. I don't think they're in business anymore, but it was. We did some behind the scenes type stuff. Just interviews and things like that for it. That was really fun because it was the first time that all of us had gotten together at the same place at the same time for a long time, and it was good to see everybody again. But the show was just it was cutting edge. I think that we were a little far ahead of our time. If it had come out even if it had came out in the 2000s, obviously with a different look as far as the dress and the dressing and all of that stuff, I think probably it would have done even better. A lot of the directors went on to Malcolm in the Middle and some of those other shows, and you see the response that that Malcolm in the Middle got. Those few years later. I think that we kind of we were just too far ahead of the curve there for mainstream.
Yeah, it was definitely ahead of its time, man. Way ahead of its time.
Yeah, and I feel like I always kind of felt like that just in the back of my mind, but in rewatching it, I've definitely noticed like there have been a few times where I've been like, this show would do really well in the current environment. Like this type of humor, these gags, everything, the cartoonishness, all that stuff would just, it really speaks to now, in a way that I think you're right. I mean, I think 1990, people were used to, family sitcoms and stuff. And, you guys were on Fox. It was brand new. They had just launched The Simpsons and everything. But like, so, trying new things was in the air, but I don't know that people were really ready for that kind of thing at the time,
It was a single cam sitcom.
It was a single camera show, exactly.
Yeah.
Which was very unusual. That's actually what attracted me to doing the part in the first place, because just a little backstory. I had done a TV special for CBS called What's Alan Watching, playing the title character Alan. That was an Eddie Murphy production. And my character was breaking the fourth wall, talking to the audience through the camera. I could interact with people I was watching on television. Basically, the storyline was, my character Alan had a crazy family life. Fran Drescher was my sister, and Barbara Barry and Peter Michael Getz were my parents, and David Packard was my brother. And then, there was a girl that I was in love with at school, and her boyfriend was Pauly Shore. And, and I would watch, television to escape from the insanity of my family. And I could interact with the characters on TV, or I could go into the TV shows themselves, or the characters would talk to me through the television. Different things like that would happen. And then it was Bob Tischler, who was one of the original Saturday Night Live. I don't know if he's one of the creators, but he's one of the primary writer-producers on the show back in the day. Tommy Schlamme directed it. But and the rest of it was really fit for all of these little vignettes that they did, these comedy vignettes, and that's where Eddie Murphy came in, playing some different characters on it. There was one where there was a mini series about James Brown and going to prison, and he played James Brown, as he was going through his trial and going into prison and all of this stuff. And there was a musical called Gandhi on Ice and some other stuff.
What was it? This was a TV movie?
It was a TV special.
Oh, TV special.
It was really supposed to be a pilot, but unfortunately, Eddie Murphy Productions and the CBS executives, they did not get along at all for whatever reason, and so they just ran it as a TV special. But it was supposed to be a series, and it was very unique. It was way ahead of its time as well. And at that time, Clyde Phillips was at CBS. He had a contract with them. He had created and developed Houston Nights for them. CBS had approached him about doing a teen comedy, a half-hour teen comedy, and they brought Lon Diamond in, and they had created Parker Lewis Can't Lose for CBS. CBS ended up passing on it, so the rights reverted back to them. And then years later, once Ferris Bueller came out and Fox went to its full schedule and all of that, they repitched it to Fox, and Fox picked it up. And I think that some of that hype about the series was probably due to the success of Ferris Bueller's Day Off and how it was comparable in some ways, even though they did the Ferris Bueller series, which we beat. That was our big competition that season was going up against them, and that was awesome for our show. Again, just to back up, What's Alan Watching was a single camera show, and it was so it was a great comedy. But I had done a half-hour sitcom. I was Nikki Papadopoulos, Webster's live-in cousin on Webster for the final season of that show. And I did not enjoy doing sitcom at all. It was a misery for me as an actor, not just because Mam and George were tyrants, but just the writing style, the line joke. There was a pacing to it that was just that you got to have that kind of rhythm as an actor where you're always on top of that, and the writing wasn't up to par at that point either during the final season of Webster. So some of the punchlines just weren't funny, so they were hard to really embrace as an actor too. But I had vowed that I would never ever do a half-hour sitcom ever again after that experience. And when they approached me with Parker Lewis, it was because I had done What's Alan Watching, and Clyde Phillips and Lon Diamond were huge fans of that show. They were like, this is the kind of show, that should be on TV. And they loved what I did, bringing that character to life. The character was kind of in some ways similar to a Parker Lewis, but with the certainty and the kind of authentic enthusiasm of the character. But Alan was far more quirky and not as popular. But so that when they approached me with it, they had offered me the part, and I turned it down like several times. I was like, dude, I'm not doing a half-hour sitcom. I just can't do it. And finally, they got me to go into a meeting with them, and that's when they told me what they wanted to do with the show, that they wanted it to be like 3 O'Clock High. They wanted the cinematic style. It was a single camera show. It was going to be like working on a film or whatever else. And when they said 3 O'Clock High, suddenly the whole pilot script made sense to me. I was like, oh, I totally get it now. I can't believe that I almost turned down this opportunity. Absolutely. Whatever you guys need from me, I'm there, So I got to actually go through the auditioning process and audition with all of the other actors and, the final callbacks and all of that. So, I was in the room with the majority of all of them. The only other people I don't think had to audition for it was probably Melanie Chardoff. I'm not sure if she had to audition for Musso. I mean, she was just so fantastic, and she was known for her comedy well before then. But it was it was all fortuitous. Had I not done What's Alan Watching, I never would have been on their list on the top of their list for Parker Lewis.
You mentioned Ferris Bueller, and I was kind of curious. You mentioned that there was a show on simultaneously, and you guys buried it basically. How did you react to comparisons to that movie more than show? I think because that's what I've always heard. I remember hearing that at the time too. Is like, oh, it's like Ferris Bueller. I've never really thought it was like Ferris Bueller, but like, how did you in that role? How did you react to those comparisons, or did you react at all?
Yeah, I didn't really react much at all because just like you said, it wasn't a Ferris Bueller's Day Off. It was something totally different. Yes, it was about the most popular guy in school. Yes, it was about a guy who was able to get over on the principal and finagle his way out of trouble or whatever else. That's about as similar as it got right there. Yeah. But it really did. It did us a huge favor having that show come on the same time because it became a media talking point. We were in the trades. There was people doing those types of comparisons and everything. And fortunately for us, we just had a creative team that had something very original. I think it was also a lot harder because how do you recreate that character of Ferris Bueller? I don't care what actor you are. I mean, Charlie Slater was a solid actor, and but how do you recreate that character? But they did us a massive favor because I don't know if the show would have been as well received had we not had that competition right out of the gate. Because it it made the audiences want to watch both.
To compare.
That made people go, oh, wait, what is this show that people are talking about while they're talking about, Ferris Bueller and this and, and it was in the trades, and there was journalists out there that were writing about the two projects when normally they probably wouldn't be,
Yeah. That's a good point.
That makes sense.
It's interesting how that worked out. Yeah. Yeah. And the Ferris Bueller TV show, I think it was canceled like halfway through their season, I think. Like I don't think it even made a full season.
I think they might have gotten to the 12th episode before it was canned. I think I only watched maybe 5 to 8 minutes of one of the episodes at a certain point. Again, I was so busy on that show, I barely had time to breathe. But I did watch a little bit of it just to kind of see, and I didn't see anything close to what we were accomplishing. We did some, especially cinematically. I mean, some of the shots that we did were mind blowing, to be honest. To go back and rewatch some of them. We at a time when there weren't drones, we were getting shots that you can only do with a drone. Like I remember we did one shot we had to shoot at the actual high school for it, even though we had our own interior high school built. We filmed at Hamilton High, and we needed to get this shot that came down the hallway, and they wanted the camera to go out the window and then come down into the quad area and then pick up the actors outside there. And so they had to redress the upstairs hallway to look like the Parker Lewis Hall. And they brought this, so they had a giant crane that was up on the second floor, where basically the chair for the crane was like inside this window at the end of the hall. And they had the Steadicam operator who was following down the hall, and then he went and he sat on the crane. They strapped him in, and then they pulled the crane out the window and then down. And I mean, it was nuts, the stuff they were doing.
No, that's definitely, like, besides the humor too, just the visual gags of the show is something that's always stuck with me. There's so many visual gags that just work so great that I just think it's underappreciated. It's such an underrated show. Like there was, well, I think the episode we recapped recently or last week, there was a gag where it's like tight on you. We see her thumb come into frame. The dolly just tracks back down the hall, like your hair's blowing, and like all the way back to her office, like all the way through the school into the office. It's just gags like that. It's just, oh man, it's just so good, so good.
Yeah, well, when we did that, they had they had the dolly, what's called a Western dolly, which is not on a dolly track. So it's got these big rubber wheels and everything. So they have that. They had a chair for me on the front. They had a chair off to the side for Melanie Chardoff, Miss Musso, so she could keep her thumb in frame. Then they had a chair for the for the guy doing the camera and all of that. And then they also had I don't know if the person was just standing on the dolly or what they were doing, but they had the special effects person with a blow dryer off camera, blowing my hair with the blow dryer as we were going down the hall and stuff like that, all the way down the hall, fitting through the doors somehow, all the way into the office. And then they pull back and she gets off of that chair and ends up back in frame and all this. I mean, it was, like I said, just the insanity of it was bananas. It was amazing to work on, but it was very difficult to pull off for sure. Some of the other things I love too is like Kubiak had his lair in the boys' bathroom. He had like, a full kitchen in there, like a fridge, and like he could cook in there. He had a chopping block, in there, and like steaks and things hanging from hooks, and then a pizza oven. It was just so unsanitary too, by the way. But just the funniest stuff like that too. And when we did one episode with like the emo crowd and they had like their own little like emo lair, this weird sort of like vampirish lair back behind the lockers somehow. And you had to get into the lair through the locker. So you'd open up a locker, go into the locker, and come out in like their weird lair. And we had our own radio station above the boys' gym up in the rafters somewhere in a hidden room and in Radio Free Flamingo. So many great gags like that, where the school itself took on a multi-dimensional reality that was far more cartoonish than it was, physical.
Yeah. I think that's one of the big draws, is just that, the fact that high school clearly exists in like a meta space. It's like the laws of physics don't matter there. I mean, you couldn't even look at the blueprint of that place. But so, that plus just the cartoonish effects in the acting too. Like it makes me laugh every single time I see Jerry take off, because he does like he turns and kicks his head back and every single time
Rocket
that
noise.
eating it. Yeah. I mean, just that, and that stuff is unique.
And his magic jacket, always pulling stuff out of the jacket. I think he pulled a cheerleader out of his jacket one time in one of the episodes. I was like, what the?
Yeah, that's not right, Jerry. The Rolodex is okay, but you can't keep people in there.
They should have done an episode where we actually went into Jerry's jacket. You know what I mean? That would have been hilarious.
Oh,
whole other dimension in there.
Parker gets lost inside Jerry's jacket.
I guess you guys were aware that like we're doing some crazy shit, some like unique shit. That's granted, it's a lot of it caused a lot more work, because you're doing something that is very cinematic, and to do it on a TV scale is gonna, like you say, give you 22-hour days and stuff. But what was the vibe on set overall? Like, were you guys all like, "Oh, we're onto something," or wasn't until like it started airing that you realized, "Oh, there's something here"?
Yeah, no, we knew right away. I mean, even during the pilot episode, we knew right away that they were really trying something different. I think the pilot episode was definitely, it was a little stressful, because it was full of unknowns. No one had ever tried to do what we were doing on television before, with that cinematic approach. And so the odds were, I felt like the odds were stacked against us for getting picked up for a full season. But once we got the go ahead, the level of enthusiasm on the show was through the roof, because the writers did such a great job creating these dynamics between the characters. I mean, the character of Lemmer, it was so tragic when he disappeared in season 3. It was just such a huge bummer for all of us, because that character was so important to the show. To have the henchman of the principal, not just the principal, but the henchman, and his ability to, disappear out of scenes. He was like, had these vampiric powers. I can't remember if he turned into a bat in one of the episodes or not, but there was plenty of episodes where he would literally just disappear and then reappear in another part of the school. And, that kind of stuff, we knew what we were up to. We knew we were doing something cutting edge. And regardless of the amount of hours that we were spending there, I don't remember anybody at all, even on the crew. I don't remember anybody really being bent out of shape about it, because all of the actors, number one, all of us were having such a good time, and we kept the level of enthusiasm and camaraderie way up there. Even with the extras, we had, the background artist, we kept pretty much the same background artist for all 3 seasons, because they wanted to have the feel of it being an authentic school. And we had a good camaraderie with the background artist. We had a lot of fun in between takes. That was back in the day when bagging was, when bagging on each other was a big thing. And there was a number of the background artists, we used to love bagging on each other, and we would get into bag offs, as they were called back then, and in between takes and stuff. And it was a really good time, a really good time. In fact, I think it was 5 or 6, maybe 6 years ago. Time flies so fast these days; it's shocking. But Lon Diamond did come to me. I had actually reached out to Lon Diamond because I had this really bizarre dream that that we were doing this weird reboot of Parker Lewis, and it was a strange dream. It was a very peculiar one, and I woke up out of it, and it dawned on me like, oh wait, I have a good idea for a reboot, because it was Parker Lewis Can't Win. And it's now years later, and Miss Musso is the mayor of Santo Domingo. Lemmer is the sheriff of Santo Domingo. Jerry is a district judge there now. Mikey's a famous rock star. Kubiak is a famous wrestler, with like the World Wrestling Federation or whatever, and everybody's going on to these big, huge things. But Miss Musso has foiled all of my entrepreneurial attempts at making it big in life and doing something big in Santo Domingo. And I'm the only one who didn't make it big after high school, with all of my big ideas and all of this stuff. I kept constantly getting shot down. And so it was like flipping the whole thing on its end, that now here's Parker Lewis and he's going back to all his buddies and he's like, oh, let's try this. Let's do this. And they're like, dude, I've already made it. I'm like, and I'm like crashing on Kubiak's couch, and I'm like borrowing money from Mikey, and, and I'm getting arrested by Lemmer and having to go to court in front of Jerry. And Jerry's like, sort of helps me because he follows the law so strictly that, he knows that these are setups and all of that. So I get out of the charges or whatever they are. And, and Miss Musso and everybody's like, why don't you just leave Santo Domingo and go make it big somewhere else? Your ideas are great, but you're never going to do it here, Park, that kind of thing. But I refuse to leave,
That's great.
But so that was the idea that I came up with. Parker Lewis Can't Win instead of Can't Lose, and just flip the whole thing on its head,
So that concludes part 1 of our interview with Corin Nemec. Be on the lookout in 2 weeks for part 2.
Until then, I'm Chris Gregory.
And I'm Chip Johnson.
Reminding you that apathy is your Orwellian prologue, so get out there and do some good. It's still really chipper for Orwellian prologue.
My friend Jerry said you guys were going to do something really neat today.
Just a couple of randos just like, hey, we remember this show you were on. Want to talk to us?